Chapter 3. The Hunting Party. The scene starts with the sound of wooden wheels being pulled as part of a horse-drawn carriage. In the carriage we have our hunting party. Ellis sits in the carriage reading his comic, deeply immersed as usual. The other men from the hunting party talk around him. "I got 15, one of the more cocky men said. "What? 15? Replied the other. "In a week?" "Nope," the man says smugly. "In a day." "No way, man," says the other. "I don't think I've even seen 15 zombies this last week." "Well, you better sharpen your eyes then," the man says. "They're out there. They just don't want you to see them. You're gonna have to look harder if you want to beat my score." Ellis is dragged out of his fantasies by the sound of Victoria's voice. "So, Ellis, I heard last night that you might be making a baby." Some of the men chuckle at this. Ellis looks up to see a cheeky grin on Vic's face. He blushes, embarrassed. "Oh man, it's Jessica that makes most of the noise." The rest of the carriage laughs. They're happy for him. Ellis rolls up his comic and puts it over his arm, tucked in place by some string as part of his armor. The hunting parties go out with makeshift armor, consisting largely of newspapers and magazines around their arms and legs. This way, they leave very little of their body exposed to bites. Since they wear vests and helmets as well, the zombies mainly can only go for the neck, which is the most exposed point. Victoria speaks again to break the silence. "Wouldn't that be great though? I mean, when this first started, I wouldn't have thought in a million years we could bring a baby into this world. But now, I think we can actually do it." Ellis smiles, now with visions of the future in his head. "Yeah, that could work." John is sitting at the front of the carriage, controlling the horses. With his back to the group, they can't see the expression on his face. He wishes he could feel that same hope and enthusiasm again, but his face now shows expressions of despair and hopelessness. The cart comes to a stop, and John throws his mask back on. He has to appear confident and unemotional, or else the whole group will fall apart. "Okay, this is the first location," John says. The group has arrived at a farm. There's a house where the inhabitants lived, and a barn for the animals, as well as a few shacks and sheds. "Victoria, why don't you take the lead? Take Ellis and Cooper and check out this place. The rest of us can go ahead to the next place," John suggests. Victoria is taken back by this, a look of surprise and maybe a little fear on her face. "Why don't you take the lead, John? We're better off staying as a group." John replies, trying to hide his disappointment. "Okay then. Ellis, check out the barn. Cooper, go with him." "Yes, boss," the men reply. "Victoria, you're with me. We'll check out the house," John commands. "Let's do it," Victoria says enthusiastically. "The rest of you, check the surrounding buildings." "Roger that," the men reply. John looks up and sees a person watching them from the window of one of the houses. When it sees him looking back, the figure disappears into the darkness. "Not a person," John mutters to himself. "Sir?" says one of the men. John collects himself and begins to brief his men. "Okay, boys, we've had zombies sighted in this area, so stay alert." He takes a pause to gather his thoughts. "I know some of you guys are glory hunters, but don't forget to watch each other's backs. People have been dying on these missions more lately, and we need to exercise caution." "Bunch of rookies," Cooper mutters. John shoots him a harsh stare. Cooper breaks eye contact and looks at the ground. "So," John continues, "let's not be stingy with our bullets. I know you guys get allocated only a certain amount, but if there are more than 2 of them, then please, use your gun for God's sake. Those bullets are no good to you if you're dead." "Understood," Victoria says, trying her best to show that she respects John as a leader. John takes one last look at the people under his command. "Let's roll out." Cooper and Ellis approach the barn, weapons at the ready. "You need to step up, Ellis," Cooper says accusingly. Ellis looks up, a little surprised at the sudden hostility. Cooper speaks again to clarify. "I've seen your numbers the last week. You haven't been killing shit out here. If you really do have a kid on the way, then you really have only 9 months left to wipe out the rest of these monsters." Ellis takes a moment to put his fantasies aside and get focused. "You're right, Cooper. Let's get these fuckers." Suddenly, Almost out of nowhere, a creature screams and runs out from behind a hay wheel. A man. Skinny. He looks starved and desperate. He charges at Cooper. With not enough distance between them to aim his gun, Cooper raises his arm to the zombie and allows it to bite. It chews down on the magazines around his arm, unable to penetrate through to his skin. Cooper pushes back into the zombie's jaw, making it fall back onto the ground. Very quickly, Cooper whips out a small knife and throws it towards the ground at the zombie. It lands perfectly into the zombie's forehead, neutralizing the creature. "See, that's how it's done, rookie," Cooper comments. There's a loud shriek, and Cooper looks up to see one of the monsters run behind the barn. Ellis calls out, "I've got one over here at the front. It ran inside." "He's all yours, rookie," Cooper replies. "I'm going after this one." Before having any chance to respond, Cooper runs off eagerly to the back of the barn. "Okay, let's do it," Ellis mutters to himself. He steps into the barn. It's dark, with only a little light seeping through the windows. He steps forward while his eyes adjust to the darkness. He hears something far in front of him at the end of the barn. A zombie, kneeling there next to a dead cow. It lifts a piece of its intestines close to its mouth, and hesitates. It's shaking. Its body is crashing. Maybe they can only digest human flesh, Ellis wonders. Either way, it's dead, he thinks to himself. He lowers his gun, and pulls out his knife. It's not worth the bullet for just one lone zombie. He approaches, trying not to make too much noise. He'd rather deal with this one without a struggle. With the armor, he will surely win any struggle against one zombie, but he'd rather take it out quickly and quietly. He steps now, almost within range of the lone zombie, when he hears the wooden crack of a floorboard above him. Suddenly, a zombie jumps down from above, and lands behind him on his right, and another lands on his left, and another on his right. Now there are not one, but 4 zombies, and they have surrounded him. The one in front turns. Its empty white eyes stare into his soul, and an evil grin across its bloody face. The one behind him tries to grab his shoulders. Ellis turns quickly and pushes it back. A second comes and throws a heavy punch into his gut, forcing the air out of him. The third grabs him by the throat and forces him to the ground. Ellis has 2 arms and 2 legs, but he has no idea where to throw them. There are 4 of these monsters. He panics and throws his limbs around frantically. As he struggles, the lead zombie gets on top of him. He looks at Ellis and gives a very human-sounding scream. It's full of anger and desperation. It lands a powerful blow into Ellis's face, cracking his nose. Blood gushes out, making the zombies more excited. Dazed, he feels his helmet lifting from his head. Realizing what's about to happen, he screams at the top of his voice, hoping Cooper or anyone would come to save him. A zombie takes a relentless bite into his cheek, ripping the flesh from his face. He uses his hands to try and push the zombies back. One of them pulls on his hair, exposing his throat to the others. The first zombie he saw takes a deep bite into his throat, ripping out his jugular. The others unclip his vest, remove it, and begin feasting on him. They rip through his shirts and start taking bites into his belly. They reach their hands in and start pulling bits out, intestines, liver. They feast in pure ecstasy. Suddenly, the back of the first zombie's head explodes and a gunshot rings through the air. Instantly the others scatter and disappear. John adjusts his eyes to try and see what's the situation. He runs to Ellis. Cooper follows. Victoria is at the front of the barn. She wants to check if Ellis is in there as well, but she understands that someone has to keep watch outside in case of another attack. John looks at Ellis's brutalized body. He's gasping for air, but instead chokes on blood. John looks into his eyes, horror running through Ellis's face. His eyes start to turn white, empty. John aims his rifle and fires into Ellis's head. "Don't get up," he says quietly. John turns to Cooper. "I told you to watch his back," John says, trying to stay calm and collective, but you can tell he's furious inside. Cooper stutters, scared that John might lose it. I was hunting round the back. We only saw one of them in here. John raises his voice. Is that what you want me to tell Jessica? Because you're not going to be the one to tell her what happened, are you? Cooper looks away. Fuck, he says to himself. Victoria looks at John from the front of the barn, the sunny day outside contrasting to the dark atmosphere inside. John meets her eyes. If she hadn't insisted that John leads the team, it would have been her ordering Ellis in here. The burden of that decision would be on her, and not him. Maybe that's why she suggested they stay together. She doesn't want to have that weight on her conscience, so the burden falls onto John.